Hey everyone, welcome to video number 1 for Chapter 5, Ancient Rome and the Rise of Christianity. So in this one, the first couple of sections of this, we're going to be talking about numerous aspects of ancient Roman civilization. And in the last section, we're going to be talking about the origins of Christianity. The reason why that gets clumped in with this chapter is because Jesus lived in the Roman province of Judea. And it was largely because of the Roman Empire that Christianity expanded from, during its early years of what was considered a little more than a small cult, a localized branch of Judaism, and then eventually expand into a major religion and now a dominant worldwide religion. All right, but first let's kind of give a brief overview of Rome. A lot of people know some stuff about Rome, right? You got your Colosseum here. You see that on the left. You've got your image of Roman centurions. We know about Roman gladiators and things like that. I think a reason why a lot of us know certain things about Rome is that Rome is a very prominent place in the history of our own Western civilization. In European history, it's often considered the high point of classical history. It built upon some of the government and philosophical foundations that we learned about in the last chapter in ancient Greece, and then later combined them with their own traditions of law and military conquest. Now, the empire the Romans built was one of the largest the world has ever seen, and its cultural traditions are still seen in parts of Europe and the United States today. Now, before we start looking at the actual history of Rome, let's take a little bit of time to learn about how the Roman world takes shape. All right, so just like with previous chapters, anytime we introduce a new civilization, the first thing we discuss is the geography. Now, first off, it's important to remember that Rome today is a city. There's no country called Rome. Present-day Rome is located in the country of Italy. So when we're discussing the geography that's influenced early Roman history, we're talking about the geography of Italy, as the title of this slide suggests. So let's take a look at Italy here. Italy is a peninsula, meaning that it's surrounded by water on 3 sides. Italy is very easy to identify on maps of Europe because of its unique shape. It's shaped like a very big boot. And Rome is pretty close to the middle. All right, here we see Rome right here, just at about the kneecap. Italy sticks out into a large body of water known as the Mediterranean Sea. Now, we're going to be talking about the Mediterranean a lot, so it is important for you to kind of be able to identify where that is on a map. Italy is centrally located in the Mediterranean. Let me move me up here so you can see. All right, so here's Italy. So this map just kind of zooms out a little bit. Didn't mean to do that just yet. This map zooms out a little bit from the first map that we saw. So here's your boot, here's Italy, and then the Mediterranean Sea is this large body of water that separates Europe up here. Okay, so here's Europe, and then you got Africa beneath it. All right, and then you have the Middle East and Asia over here. Now, the word Mediterranean is Latin in origin, and it roughly means middle, right? So you got medi, meaning middle, and then terrain, meaning earth. It was located literally in the middle of the Roman world, between Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. And as we just said, Rome was in the middle of it. Now back to Italy, though. Italy has fertile plains for agriculture. This is in contrast to Greece. Notice how they're fairly close to each other. Here's Italy. Here's Greece. All right, we talked about Greece in the last chapter. And hopefully you remember from the previous chapter that Greece did not have a lot of great land for farming. This led to a relatively small population and Greeks having to move to other lands, such as Italy. We'll talk more about that later. Italy, though, was able to support a larger population because it had a lot of good farmland. Another difference between Italy and Greece is that Italy doesn't have much in the way of geographic barriers. Greece was a lot of mountains and islands, which made unifying a problem. Italy was way easier to unite because travel within it was easier. Now, let's get into the history part. First, we're going to go back to the very, very beginnings and talk about the early settlement of Italy. Move me back down here. Try that again. There we go. Now, the early ancestors of the Romans were known as Latins. There we go. And they settled in and around the Italian peninsula about around 800 BCE. All right, so about 2,800 years ago, 2,900 years ago. And the Latins settled in villages along 7 low-lying hills, right? Here is Italy, and this area in here is where the Latins would be, right? So the people of Latium. We'll talk about some of these other people in a second. Although before we get into that, one thing to notice, you look at the yellow, Greeks. All right, all down here on the bottom of the boot, even a little bit of Sicily over here, that island, those were all Greek colonies. So that's going to be important when we talk about Roman expansion throughout Italy, why they're going to absorb an awful lot of Greek cultures, because they come into contact with Greeks that were living on Italy. Anyway, back to the Latins. So they lived on these 7 low-lying hills. They formed villages around it, and these would be the 7 hills of Rome as these villages continued to expand and consolidate into a single city. Now, according to Roman legend, Rome was founded by twin brothers. And again, we're dealing mostly with legend here. They were known as Romulus and Remus. They were twin brothers who, according to legend, were sons of a Latin woman and the god of war. Right, so you always got to have this divine connection when you're talking about the creation of civilizations. And another legend said that they were raised as babies by a she-wolf. Making the wolf a sacred animal to Romans. Now, the Latins were not the only people in Italy. The dominant civilization at the time were the Etruscans. Now, you see the Etruscans, the Greek up here. I'm sorry, the green up there, not Greek. Right, they're up more to the northern part of Italy. So they ruled over a pretty big chunk of it. And while they were a completely separate people from the Latins, they had tremendous influence over later Roman culture, cultural diffusion. They lived right next door to each other. For example, the Etruscan alphabet, which itself was modeled after the Greek alphabet, but this became the model for the Latin alphabet, which we still use to this day. Right? So you see some similarities there. A, B, D, E, and a lot more similar to our current day alphabet than that old Greek alphabet that we were looking at last chapter. Absolutely not the same, but you can see the formations of the early Latin alphabet that's going to come from the Etruscan one. Another thing that the Romans got from the Etruscans was the style of dress, namely the togas. Right, you see these robes that these people are wearing here. These robes are synonymous with Roman culture. When we think of Romans, we think of them wearing their togas, but they originated from the Etruscans. Now, eventually, the Romans would drive out the Etruscans, and in the year 753, established the Kingdom of Rome. Now, this date is generally regarded as the year Rome was officially founded, and as a kingdom, Rome was obviously a monarchy, but this monarchy wouldn't last that long. A monarchy was viewed by the Romans as being too Etruscan, right? They wanted something that was their own thing. And so they eventually developed a new form of government known as a republic. But we're actually going to stop here for this video. We'll call this video 1A, and then we're going to pick up talking about the Roman Republic in video 1B.